Could the Montreal Canadiens pull off a blockbuster trade with the rebuilding Chicago Blackhawks? Is this something that makes sense? We'll discuss the possibilities coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, I wanted to discuss a scenario here today that we could possibly see, but I just want to caution you, this is not an NHL trade rumor. There's no sources indicating that the Habs and the Hawks are talking. This is just an idea that was proposed by radio host Georges Laraque, of course, former player of the Habs, suggesting that they really should consider going to the Chicago Blackhawks and making a massive offer to obtain superstar forward Patrick Kane. So I wanted to discuss that scenario with you here today. I thought it was a very intriguing conversation to have. Obviously, Patrick Kane comes with a lot of success. Very high-end player with still a lot of game left in him, I do believe. And obviously, the Montreal Canadiens have made a lot of moves to put themselves in a better position for the playoffs and everything going forward. So we just want to go through what the proposal would be from the conversation here on the radio with Georges Laraque. And I just want to see what everybody thinks. This is strictly just for conversational purposes. Obviously, like I said, there's no links here suggesting these two teams are actually having serious talks around this idea, but you never know. Could they in the future? It's certainly possible. As we know, Habs general manager Marc Bergevin used to work for the Chicago Blackhawks, knows that team very well, worked under Stan Bowman, and if he did want to do this kind of move, these two teams have done a fair bit of deals before. There's a lot of trade history between the franchises during these two GMs' current tenures and their current spots here. So what the proposal was the Montreal Canadiens should offer center iceman Jesperi Kotkaniemi, 2018 first round pick, and pretty solid sniper Cole Caulfield, as well as their upcoming 2021 first round pick in exchange for forward Patrick Kane. And of course, because the Habs are giving the Hawks so much as a return favor here, the Hawks would retain some of Kane's salary. Now, obviously, we're not sure exactly to what degree the Hawks would retain. We know the maximum would be 50%. His cap hit is $10.5 million. So his cap hit would be, at least at minimum $5.25 million, possibly a little bit more, depending on exactly what that salary retention would be. Now, he has 3 years left on his contract with Chicago, as does Jonathan Toews and Duncan Keith. We discussed all three of their core members just a few days ago at a potential trade rumor type video that spawned after the Hawks announced they were officially kind of embracing the rebuild, and they put out a letter to their fans, outlining how they've had to say goodbye to some key people in the organization recently, and that they're really focused on the future and acquiring as many young assets and developing their prospects and so on as they kind of rebuild for a potential another run at glory and championships here somewhere in the near future once this team is ready to contend again, which they're hoping won't be probably more than a few years' time. But the Montreal Canadiens are a team who haven't really been contenders for a while, but have made a lot of moves this offseason to kind of get themselves in a better position to work towards that. We saw in the current 2020 NHL playoffs, they had a surprise upset over the Pittsburgh Penguins and actually, made some noise in the playoffs. So I think that kind of gave Bergevin and the Habs some confidence, and obviously they want to make some moves here to get going. They just solidify their backup goaltending. They've added on defense. They've added at the forward position with Tyler Toffoli and Josh Anderson. Could a superstar like Patrick Kane be the price that they need to really put them into contender status? So let's take a look at this trade proposal a little bit further. Now, of course, the 2021 first round pick, we don't really know what that would be as of yet, because clearly we don't know what the upcoming season is going to be. There's a lot of question marks around it, but the intention for including that would be that you would expect the Habs to have a really good season, finish high in the standings, hopefully at least win, a couple of playoff rounds, but you'd want, obviously, more success if you're acquiring Kane. But the whole point would be that pick should be a really late first-round pick if things go according to plan, and this addition makes a huge difference, and they do go, deep into the playoffs. So, obviously, if it's a late first-round pick, and you're looking at, anywhere from 25 to 31, it's really not nearly as substantial of a loss. Now, they could obviously put a lottery protection clause into there as well, so if things go sideways completely and they end up with a really high pick, that they could keep it and defer to the year after. That's likely something they would do as a just-in-case measure. But obviously, the Montreal Canadiens would also include a couple of really key prospects and key pieces to their future, like I said, which would be Kotkaniemi and Cole Caulfield. Now, Kotkaniemi, projects to be one of their top two centers longer term, along with Nick Suzuki. We saw how he played in the 2020 playoffs. It was a major step forward for him, a great experience. Cole Caulfield has yet to make his NHL debut, but we've seen him tearing up records and breaking records with Jack Hughes on a United States National Team Development Program when he was the year he was drafted, scoring at a really high rate. Obviously played college hockey last year, had a reasonably successful season, and obviously we'll see what his draft plus 2 season brings for him for the coming season. But he's expected to be a pretty prolific goal scorer at the NHL level if things project the way that many experts think that they will. So you obviously have a lot of risk associated with this for the Montreal Canadiens. You'd have to be at a point where you're guaranteeing yourself that this is the piece we need to put us over the top, and we're going to risk our future to possibly win 1 or 2 championships during the remaining contract of Patrick Kane's contract. Because obviously, when that 3 years are up, there's no guarantee that he stays for starters. Hard to say what level his game is at by the end of the 3 years. I mean, he's aged relatively well, hasn't really dipped down too much in his production. What a couple more years will do to him, it's difficult to say. I mean, Father Time is, undefeated at this point, and he catches up to everybody, no matter how good they are. At some point, their play will decline to the point that they're not worth, what they used to be. Obviously, even if he re-signed, you could consider re-signing for a lower amount of money. Obviously, at that point, things would be very, very different. But you're looking at basically the Habs right now only have just over $300,000 in cap space left after all the moves that they've made, and they have a lot of money tied up next year and beyond as well. So this would have to be a corresponding move where they'd have to move out some other money as well to make the numbers work just from a financial standpoint. Regardless of what you think of the trade and the assets going out, they'd have to make the numbers work money-wise. I mean, you're probably looking at a potential pending UFA like a Thomas Tatar at a 4.8 cap hit going out, and maybe even a Paul Byron. Now, Byron's a name that been apparently on the trade market. We've talked about a few times. That has been shopped around. So if those two players were to leave Montreal via trade, that would free up enough money along with the Kotkaniemi contract. They'd be pretty close at that point to being cap compliant. But it could even be another victim in there as well. Like they wouldn't have enough going out to Chicago in this deal to make that work. Now, of course, you could do things differently. If Chicago's going to take a contract back that they may not be overly fond of, they're not going to want to retain as much salary either. So, obviously, difficult to say what would be the best way to structure the deal. But for purposes here of looking at the trade, I just wanted you to forget about the money aspect of it here for a minute, because we know the Canadiens would have to make other corresponding moves to get their salary cap position in line. That's a given. They don't have the cap space to take on Patrick Kane as is right now, even if the Hawks retain 50%. We know another player or two would have to leave, and we know who the most likely candidates for that would be. But, Rickley, just looking at their team as a whole, if you saw the addition of Patrick Kane, would you be willing, especially if you're a Habs fan, and I know we have a lot of Montreal fans that watch this channel, obviously Habs content usually has a lot of comments and a lot of opinions, so that's what I want to hear from you down below in the comments, so let me know what you think. Would you be willing to part with Kotkaniemi, Caulfield, and a first if it meant getting 3 years of Patrick Kane? Do you think that would be enough to take them up a notch? I mean, look at the goaltending situation. You've got Carey Price, you've got Jake Allen, so you're pretty solid that way. You have Caden Primo as your number 3 waiting in the wings, so you're pretty solid that way. You get some great veterans on the blue line, like Weber and Petrie, still going strong. You've got some good youth on the blue line as well, like Romanov jumping in, mixed in with guys like Ben Sherratt and Joel Edmondson, Brett Kulak, etc. Then you've got in the forward group, you just added Josh Anderson and Tyler Toffoli. Suzuki is obviously taking some major steps forward. Now, part of this we have to look at as well, because if you're going to trade Kotkaniemi, you cannot lose Philip Deneau as a UFA as well. You just cannot lose both of those players. It's an absolute must, because at this point, Deneau, one of his big concerns would be that he's not getting enough playing time, and he's playing lower in the lineup because of players like Kotkaniemi and Suzuki passing him here and playing so well in the playoffs that he was basically getting third-line minutes when he was more used to getting first or sometimes second-line minutes. So that was a big blow to him. Now, you'd have to have the space to be able to keep Philip Deneau in the mix and sign him to a longer-term extension. If you could run with Suzuki and Danault 1-2 center, you could possibly it would make living without Kotkaniemi a little bit easier, especially when you throw in the addition of Patrick Kane. You still have other prospects like Ryan Poehling, for example, who could be that number 3 center. So you're not in too bad a shape that way. Now, if I'm Montreal and I want to be serious about making a Kane offer, it probably would take something substantial like this to get the Hawks to really perk up their ears and listen to make this possibly happen. Of course, Kane has to agree to it as well. So there's a lot of things that have to fall into place and work out here just right for this kind of blockbuster dream scenario to ever come to be. I mean, if I'm Bergevin, I'm probably not making that my first offer, to be honest. I'm probably going in to the conversation with some different prospects as part of the offer to the Chicago Blackhawks. I would probably offer between Kotkaniemi and Caulfield. I probably would hate to see both of them go. I would only include one of the two, and I'd probably mix in Ryan Poehling as the other one instead. I don't see Poehling as being as high end of a prospect as those two guys. So if I could keep one of them and put Poehling in there in a first as well, even if I had to throw in something additional, whether it be a mid-round, third, fourth round pick or another prospect, but even if you could also consider going like Poehling and newly drafted Caden Gooley and maybe a couple of picks, like I would try to go that route if I could. I mean, the Hawks are going to probably want more high-end talent, and it may not even come close to having much of a conversation around it. But at the end of the day, it's a very intriguing concept, something that's pretty unlikely to never happen. I think the odds of it happening are slim just because of all the things that has to fall into place. Kane has to waive his no trade. The Habs have to move out other money, which is difficult right now. There's just a lot there. But it's an interesting idea for Montreal to really add that blockbuster player, to kind of put them over the top, to try to really be at a spot to win a Stanley Cup before guys like Weber and Price are at the end of the road here. And, it's something that I just wanted to talk about. I thought it was a fun idea. Like I said, when I first heard about it through an article that I read about what Laraque was proposing on the radio, I thought it was, kind of outlandish at first, but it's like, but it's a fun idea to think about. And that's what we do on this channel. For those of you, I know some of you always comments saying, this and that about whatever ideas that we talk about. But at the end of the day, this is just for discussion purposes. Again, there is no rumor suggesting these two teams are talking. It's just an idea proposed out there on Montreal radio that I thought was interesting, and I want to know what everybody out there thinks. If you're a Montreal fan especially, and you're proposed with this trade, Patrick Kane for Caulfield, Kotkaniemi in a first, do you pull the trigger? That's all we need to know. Don't think about the rest of it. It does not matter about the money. Obviously, other things would have to be, worked out to make it happen. Kane has to agree. There's a lot of other X factors here. I just want to know, would you do that trade if it were a legit possibility? So let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.